Hello everyone and welcome back to some WARNO tutorial guides. Today we're gonna cover helicopters and we're gonna cover what their pros and cons are, how to use them, and a couple of specific use cases and tips and tricks that are really important if you want to make helicopters work. So let's get into it and let's start with the pros and cons of the helicopter arm, which is a pretty diverse bunch as well. So as always, starting with the pros, we're gonna go in with their fast movement. And they're also really flexible movement, making them perfect to reinforce a push if you just want to get a bit more oomph behind it, or stop an enemy attack by getting them over there as fast as possible. As they not only fly fast, they also don't need the road network or go around cover to get there. So they can go to places where the road network maybe isn't as good, still really fast, and that obviously is a big advantage, and allowing you to maneuver around the map easier than with other units. Plus, unlike planes, they can stay around for a long time. Their fuel runs out pretty slowly, so you don't have to manage them and refuel them all the time, and they will stay permanently on the map. And then the second advantage is that they have a pretty long range usually, like the ATGMs especially. If we go for Cobra with the tow here, that has 2,600 meters. Hellfire goes even further with 2,800, but even the rockets have a pretty good range. 2,275 meters is still a pretty good range, especially considering that advantage number 3, they can usually only be attacked by AA weapons on long range. So MGs and so on only have a low range like 1,400 or 1,500 meter against the helicopter, so they usually can strike the enemy from distances where the enemy can't strike back unless they have dedicated AA. And that also perfectly leads us to the weaknesses, as helicopters are pretty squishy. So 4 hit points here, for example, meaning that any AA weapon kills you, and even the tankier ones only go up to 8 hit points, and at best 8 hit points and 20% ECM, or 10 hit points and 20% ECM, like the Chinook here. Attack helicopters, 8 hit points and 20% ECM, which means that the survivability, both against planes that can rush onto them and AA weapons, once they start getting hit, is pretty low. So you don't want to have them get hit, because the chance of survival, especially for the small ones, is pretty small. Maybe a couple of 50 cal rounds when you get a bit too close to an enemy IFV, that might work out, that you can get out there, but as soon as you get fired upon by something bigger, you better be at max range of the enemy and just get out of dodge immediately, or you are going to go down. And that's, for expensive unit like an Akula, obviously pretty scary. And even for the cheaper ones, they can get you in a lot of trouble, losing a lot of points quite quickly there. Second, which goes in hand with this, is they can't use cover. So the ground units obviously can play a lot around with cover, and that helps them stay hidden. You can't put these units into cover directly. They won't get any stealth bonus. Even when they land, they can only land on fields, so they still will be spotted from longer ranges. They at least can use line of sight blockers there and land behind the forest, but still, if an enemy has any recon around, they will spot you. You can't hide these units, so that's a bit of a problem as well. And then third is, their optics are only normal everywhere as well, so they, or even mediocre on the transport ones. So meaning that you will need other units to spot for them to use their long ranges. Like the Hellfire, unless a tank is driving over an open field, you won't be able to shoot at the enemy target at max range, because these guys can't spot for themselves. So you will need to match them. Recon helicopters can help out there to get your attack helicopters in there, but the normal helicopter tab units often will need assistance to really use their max range there to the fullest. So that gets us to the small tips and tricks that we will need to fully use them, because helicopters at the moment, they aren't at the best spot in WARNO, I would say. But with the tips and tricks that we will get to, you can get still a good amount out of them. And then we're gonna go into the use cases afterwards. And the first tip has to do with flying whilst having changed altitude on. So you can change altitude. Like usually when helicopters fly, they fly on high altitude and go up there so that they can be seen from long away and can be shot at. And there's a change altitude button that is not mapped with a hotkey. You can change a hotkey to it, just like you can change a hotkey for the land button. And both are really useful to do when you want to dodge enemy planes coming in. You want to land or change altitude to get behind cover so that the enemy doesn't see your helicopter anymore, so they can't shoot you anymore. And you usually, when you move, as I said, go up to high altitude. But if you gonna do it in small steps, less than 500 meters, and don't go over any cover, you can stay on low altitude. See how this helicopter stays low? This is really helpful, as also a plane that tries to strafe you still will strafe the old position, so you want to at least do a small sidestep so that the strafing plane does miss you once you are on low altitude. So that then it will hit the old position and strafe that position. And you in general also can move a bit behind cover, but once you click too far, like this distance, they will go up again. You can also Q-click change altitude, so that once the helicopter reaches the position, it at least will go down. Really helpful to set up behind bushes when in a position where you want to use the helicopter to control area. So yeah, this is tip number 1. Let's move on to the second one. And tip number 2 is that when the helicopter is landed, it can still hit enemy ground targets. It can still use its weapons in a frontal arc. You might want to make sure that it goes the right direction when it lands by dragging the right mouse key to move it around and set up in which way it looks. And then when it goes down there, it will be able to shoot its missiles still from the ground, as you can see here, especially helpful on long-range helicopters, because enemy AA, they count as ground targets at this point, and enemy AA can't shoot back at them on the full range. And especially with the long-range 2,800 or 3,000 meter range helicopters, like the 14 here with the longest range, no unit can shoot them at full range on the ground. So they really have a big range advantage, and it can be really exploited against enemy vehicle AA, where you just land and then shoot them on the ground, and then when that is killed, you go back up and kill the rest of the ground units. Like, that's something that you have to be really careful of about when you play against units like this, against good players, and that's also something that you can use to really dominate the game. It is a bit exploity, and I hope Fusion fixes it eventually, but currently it is pretty strong, and you should use it. So yeah, landing helicopters, tip number 2. Let's move on to the real use cases. And this brings us to use cases, and the first classic use case is the helicopter rush, in which you bring out your helicopters in a pretty solid force, at least 3-4, partially in divisions that can do even more, like here in 101st. And what you want to do is beat the enemy opener, kill more units than you lose, and especially take as much count as possible. And the things you want to go off is exploit slow enemy AA, and especially against divisions that have forward deployment but no forward deploy AA, this can be strong to kill off their forward deploy infantry, but also against divisions that have slower AA units like the Strela 10M here that only can go 75 kmh on the road. Like, if their recon is faster and the infantry is faster, you might want to catch them there, and then the enemy either has to fall back or give you some kills. It's usually not a full-on game-winning move nowadays anymore. They nerfed it quite a bit, which is good. It was really OP in the early days of WARNO. You also have to watch out for fighters. You want to get your own fighters out to deal with something like a MiG-21 coming along. I was a bit late here. Phantom should have been already out. And then hit the enemy and retreat as soon as you see AA. And maybe swing to another flank. They usually play on a wider map where they are a bit more spread out. They can't have the AAS at any spots, and your helicopters are way more agile than their AA is usually, so they either have to fall back to their AA, or you might get some kills on the flank there afterwards. So this is pretty important. The enemy comes up with Strelas now, fall back, try to kill them if they overstep again, and get more of your other units out there. Usually, if you open up with a healer rush, you don't want to follow up with more healers, because the enemy is going all out AA, so switch into something else at that point. And role number 2 is area denial. And for that, you usually want to put your helicopter behind your front line, and best next to a tree line so that you can hover below and above it, and create an area where enemy ground vehicles can't go without enemy AA support and enemy short support that push forward with them. So you want to put them there. You can even put them low and only pop them out when the enemy vehicles actually come in. That is a good way of using them, having them behind the tree lines to block open fields ahead of it. You can combine it with ground-based ATGMs. That works really well against pushes where the enemy wants to push vehicle AA up towards the helicopter, then the ground-based AA can attack that. And if they try to push with ground vehicles against the ATGM on the ground, you pop up your ATGM from the helicopter and shoot that way. So they need both combined to be able to push through. Or you can just have the helicopter and be a bit cheaper and force the enemy to bring AA. So that's the two ways that you want to use it. And it's really efficient to hold large areas, especially on the flank, without as much investment there when you use small little helicopters. You can also do it with the strong Hellfire Apaches also, and then use them for something else later, though they are not really efficient for this usage only. That's where BO-105s and similar helicopters, especially on the NATO side, come into play. And the next use case is the hit and run, where you push forward, mostly with attack helicopters like the Mi-24s, that also bring some rockets and some ATGMs to try to get some specific units killed and get out of there before the enemy ground AA can catch up. So any mispositioning where the enemy, for example, pushes tanks forward, then you try to get a kill, and then these helicopters usually have exhausted most of their rockets, so you go back home with them and try to do it again. Keep them back in the base and resupply, and then come back up at another weak point. Really good against divisions that only have missile AA, especially the British. Or when you kill an enemy AA unit at one spot, you just want to rush in, get back out. And as I said, Mi-24s are the prime helicopter for it. Apaches and so on can work out as well. The European helicopters usually not as great for this. So you usually want to do it with something like a Hind, where you can really come in, resupply them afterwards, and then come around again and just really abuse that one opportune moment, and then get them back to resupply, keep them back, and then come in for kill again once they have resupply. And the next part is pretty similar to the hit and run, but it's behind your front line. It's the counterattack or just like cleanup operation, where you call in helicopters quickly to deal with a breakthrough like this, using your helicopters to come in, swoop in, and shoot the enemy on the ground when they try to break through, so that you can kill their breakthrough off. Is obviously especially potent if the enemy doesn't bring AA with it, or you can snag the AA maybe with your last remaining ground unit and then strike the remaining tanks with your helicopters. Something similar you can do with planes as well, though with planes you still have to worry about long-range AA behind the enemy line, and with helicopters, the maximum range the enemy can shoot you from is 3,175 meters, so if you don't see any AA around, likely there is no AA around, so helicopters can swoop in a bit and counter-strike against breakthrough units, and can be a really time-efficient and cost-efficient way of dealing with a bigger plop of enemy units, though obviously you have to weigh how much AA is there, because if there's two set SUs, they will just shred you. If there's two PUs or so, and you're gonna be in trouble, and then have nothing left. So be careful in how you use that, and be careful in how you bring that stuff in to counterattack and get the enemy stricken. And then there is the final way of using it, with a big helicopter push. And that one only works with a couple of divisions that actually have the forces, like, for example, 35th BDV, where you can get a lot of MI8s, MI24s, and Akulas assembled, and where you can just overwhelm the enemy and overwhelm the enemy air defense. So even something like a pivot can't stop you. That would maybe disrupt the early game rush, where you rush in without taking the damage, or where you only run into one or two of these units. This is more one where you just get so much force that even if the enemy has multiple stingers and units like that, you can just run them over and just get through them. Like, just move on and get the territory that you need to actually get a take back online, or get those final couple of points that you need, and just push through the enemy. Can even be a win condition for just destroying the whole enemy units. It's a lot weaker than it was back in the day, because a lot more units can efficiently or at least decently shoot against helicopters. Like, you can't just fly over everything straight away. Helicopters lost hit points. 50 cults and other MGs are a good bit more efficient against them nowadays. So you need to be a bit more careful, but even something like a Stinger push can't help you when you can't hold you back when you have enough solid helicopters that can take the beating. And yeah, you take the damaged one back. You need at least 6 point, better 8 point hit point helicopters to do it. You can mix in lighter helicopters, like in 101st, you can mix in the little birds, but you need to have some big helicopters inside of there as well. So really, it only works with a couple limited divisions, but there it can be the big win condition, running over units like Stingers and pivots even, and get you the victory. So that is it, guys. Let me know what you think, and if you have any further questions, leave them down below as well. And yeah, we're gonna continue with artillery in the next one, so see you all there. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.